Context is very important when trying to understand almost any piece of art, from music to movies, from paintings to sculptures. Understanding the surrounding factors which led to the creation, the change, or even the destruction of any piece of art is crucial to having a more complete image and grasping its overall meaning and significance. In the next series of videos, I will try to paint with a very broad brush the context in which the Russian composer Sergei Vasilyevich Rachmaninoff wrote all the wonderful music he had written. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with at least some of his musical themes. They have been used throughout the 20th century, from Muse to Sinatra and from Eric Cartman's All By Myself to having influenced a lot of movie scores. Rachmaninoff has been a lasting influence even decades after his death. The series is inspired by this book, Sergei Rachmaninoff, A Lifetime in Music, written by Sergei Bretonson and Jay Leda. If you guys want to go into a bit more detail and learn even more about his life, I really recommend that you grab this book. It's a wonderful read and it goes pretty fast. But without further ado, here is the life of Sergei Rachmaninoff. Born on April 1st, 1873, Sergei Rachmaninoff's clearest memory of the piano which his grandfather played was of being punished by being placed under it or crouching in a corner while someone, usually his mother or father, played it. The part Sergei took in the choice of his own career was recalled to him 54 years later by the governess who played a role in that important decision. While living in Switzerland in 1934, Rachmaninoff received a letter from Madame de Fert, who was then an old lady asking for an inscribed photograph. But in 1880, she was a young Swiss girl looking after his sisters, while Rachmaninoff was taught by Russian tutor Dombrowski. "Let me prove to you that I was a witness to the discovery of your gift for music. You will recall that Madame, your mother, enjoyed accompanying my songs at the piano, but do you remember the day when an excursion was arranged for some guests, and how you stayed home with the pretext of not feeling well, and I was obliged to stay too and take care of you? A few minutes after all had departed, you came to me and in your most cajoling way asked if you could play the beautiful piano that was never to be touched without supervision. And how astonished I was to hear your small hands play chords that may not have been complete, but were certainly without a single wrong note. You made me sing 3 times Schubert's Plainte de jeune fille, and I had to promise not to tell your mother how we spent the afternoon. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, I did not keep my word and told your mother that evening. Next morning the news was sent to your grandfather, who arrived on the next train and ordered your father to go to Petersburg and bring back a good piano teacher from the Conservatory." It is worth noting that his first teacher was Anna Ornatskaya, a graduate from St. Petersburg Conservatory. Even from his childhood, his parents quarreled quite a lot. It is said that his father was perpetually offering courtship of every woman in range, and thus did not make his wife's life a happy one. His mother, however, was loving but very strict. She came from a rich family, and his father gained some of her material assets when he married her. This did not, however, strengthen their relationship. In 1882, his father lost the last of 5 estates, and the Rachmaninoffs moved away from a lovely house on the Volkhov River to an unattractive and crowded flat in St. Petersburg. Sergei got a scholarship at St. Petersburg Conservatory, where he acted very independently, getting the nickname "Я сам," which means myself, as he always refused help from everyone. Soon after, however, Sophia, his sister, died from a diphtheria infection. Combine this with his father's rather past reckless behavior, and you get much strain within the family. The case made against Vasily, his father, was clear to all, even to his children. After many quarrels, there was a complete rupture. The avoided formal separation as divorce in the Orthodox Church was forbidden, but Vasily agreed to leave St. Petersburg and thus place his children in his wife's care. All suffered in this separation, and the effect on Sergei was noticeable. The only pleasure that he could count on was the annual winter visit from grandmother Butakova. They used to love visiting St. Petersburg churches while they were together, and right after, he would sit at their small piano and play over the chants they had just heard. As we shall see, these chants and the church bells will become a massive influence throughout his life. Before the situation with his father at the conservatory, he was hardworking. After, as he gained too much liberty, he grew lazy, strolling aimlessly through the city rather than attend classes in subjects that did not interest him. In his music classes, however, he would shine without much effort. There was this famous class in music theory known for its difficulty, the class of Rubets. It was no burden for little Sergei, for his teacher so admired his perfect ear and pitch that he did not bother him with tedious assignments. When term examinations came at the piano, he did quite well, but the marks for his general subjects became so disgraceful that he ended up altering his report card before showing it to his mother. She had too much on her mind to detect the fraud. When in 1885 he failed in all his general subjects in the last spring examination, the only punishment he feared was to be forbidden his vacation with his grandmother. His report card fraud could not be kept up forever. His first piano teacher, Anna Ornatskaya, heard that the council of the conservatory might take away the scholarship from this mischievous boy and came to his mother to give her all the details that had been so carefully hidden from her. Luckily, his grandmother intervened and their summer vacation together was not postponed. Sergei also had a sister, Yelena, and growing up, he often spoke of how greatly influenced he had been by her musical tastes and accomplishments. As a child, she had entertained her parents and friends with her musical ability, just as Sergei now used his astonishing natural ability to slide through the conservatory. At the age of 16, she developed a beautiful voice, and it was she who introduced him to Tchaikovsky's music, just then becoming popular. She went to Moscow with the idea of auditioning at the Bolshoi Opera, and she immediately got accepted and was to start her career in the following autumn. Public musical fame was about to come to a member of the Rachmaninoff family, but just as she was preparing to leave her aunt's estate and assume her position in Moscow, at the end of that summer she fell ill and very quickly died. This left a profound scar in little Sergei's already troubled heart. The threat of being dismissed from the conservatory was becoming very real. His mother grew desperate and called on Alexander Siloti, Sergei's cousin, who was just then returning to St. Petersburg. Siloti listened to Sergei's playing, tested his ear, and had a talk with him, and then gave his decision to his mother. The boy had great ability and must continue his musical studies. His laziness might be cured by separating him from his family and St. Petersburg. I know only one man who can help him, my former teacher, Zverev. The boy must go to Moscow and submit completely to his discipline. And so it was decided. At the end of this summer, he was to live at Nikolai Zverev and take classes at the Moscow Conservatory. Everything that his cousin Siloti told him about Zverev and Zverev's discipline scared him thoroughly. It was in Moscow that Rachmaninoff the musician was born. Training now filled every waking moment of his everyday. His first 3 days in Moscow were spent with his aunt, Siloti's mother, but after she delivered him into the care of his new master, Zverev, the boy saw little of her or of any other relative living or visiting in Moscow. Nikolai Zverev was known as an excellent but severe piano teacher, but when a needy pupil showed unusual gifts, Zverev's generosity matched his severity. This year, Rachmaninoff was one of 3 pupils whom Zverev brought into his home, on the condition that he could supervise their lives and interests while they continued piano lessons with him at the conservatory. He demanded his preferred students who lived at his place to partake in cultural activities like concerts and operas, and paid their every expense. In exchange, these boys would have to obey his every command and recognize no other authority. His house was headquarters for all musical travelers, and his pupils were always on show. "Listen to what my pupils can do," he would often say while letting them entertain guests. Rachmaninoff was 12 when he was accepted by Zverev. A very strict regime followed, consolidated by Zverev's sister, who would discipline them when Zverev was at the conservatory or doing private tutoring during the day. Rachmaninoff writes, This practice had to begin at 6 a.m., and we took turns in being the one to get up at that hour. No excuse was ever allowed. If a pupil had been at a play or concert the night before, or had not gotten to bed until 2 a.m., nothing could change this schedule. He whose turn it was to begin at 6 in the morning would get up and crawl to that piano no matter what, and woe to him if any sleepiness was betrayed in his playing. Zverev would storm in, a frightening figure in underwear with a horrible shout and sometimes a hard smack. The sleepy pupil would instantly wake up and play with new attention. Zverev turned his home from what might have been a musical prison into a musical paradise. From a very strict teacher, he completely changed on Sundays. That afternoon and evening, he always kept open house for the greatest figures in Moscow's musical world. Tchaikovsky, Taneyev, Arensky, Sofanov, Siloti, as well as university professors, lawyers, actors would drop in, and the hours passed in talk and music. For us boys, the delightful feature of these Sundays was that Zverev would not permit any of the great musicians present to touch the piano unless by way of some explanation or criticism, for we, not they, were the solo artists on these occasions. Our impromptu performances were Zverev's greatest joy. No matter what we played, his verdict was always, "Fine, well done, excellent." He let us play anything we felt like playing, and would call on his guests to bear him out in his opinion of us. I cannot adequately describe what a spur to our ambition was this opportunity to play for the greatest musicians in Moscow and to listen to their kindly criticism, nor what a stimulant it was to our enthusiasm. During a trip to one of his richest clients in Crimea, a teacher named Nikolai Ludakin was put by Zverev to teach them theory and basic harmony as a preparation to enter Arensky's harmony course in the autumn term. The intense exposure to an exciting new world of music seemed to have had an immediate impact on Rachmaninoff. There, he started composing. Ladukin apparently accomplished his mission with total success, for all three boys passed their fall entrance examinations in theory and were enrolled in Arensky's harmony class at the Moscow Conservatory. For the opening of the school year, Tchaikovsky was there, and Rachmaninoff idolized him. He composed his first composition, a scherzo for orchestra in F major, in 1887. According to Nikolai Vierino, one violin student at the Moscow Conservatory who ended up being a great friend to Sergei and other of Zverev's pupils, Rachmaninoff was a balanced, quiet youth who never argued or shouted and who laughed a great deal, loving everyone's pranks but rarely participating in any of them. At the turn of that year, 1887, Rachmaninoff composed 3 nocturnes for piano and presented them to Zverev. 4 other piano pieces may have been composed at this time: a romance, a prelude, a melody, and a gavotte. Zverev tried to get them all into Siloti's piano class, even though Rachmaninoff wanted to study with another teacher. At the end of the school year, there was another choice to be made, once more, not by Rachmaninoff, but for him. In advancing into the superior section of the theory class, students were divided into those who were to work in general theory or in special theory, and it was clear to all that anyone recommended for the latter category was considered a potential composer. By the end of his junior course, Rachmaninoff had made an excellent impression on his teacher, Arensky, with the harmonizing of simple melodies. The Conservatory invited Tchaikovsky to serve as an honorary member of the examination board. He had only recently returned from several busy but satisfying months abroad and had settled down at his country retreat to sketch his new 5th symphony, but he still regarded the Conservatory as his duty and came to Moscow when called. Rachmaninoff described the 2-day examination. At the last examination of the harmony course, the pupils were separated and given 2 problems to be solved without the help of a piano. The first was to harmonize a melody in 4 parts, I think the theme was Haydn's this time, and the second was to write a prelude of 16 to 30 bars in a given key, and with the specified modulation to include the pedal points on both the dominant and the tonic. The examination began at 9 o'clock in the morning. Tchaikovsky's presence gave the event a special character this year, when all candidates had turned in their work, each one bringing a frown to Arensky's face. I alone was left, for I had got entangled in this daring modulation of the prelude and could not find a satisfactory solution. At last, by 5 o'clock, I had finished and handed my 2 pages to Arensky. When he glanced at them, he did not frown, and this gave me some hope. On the following day, the board was to hear us play our own work, and when I finished my turn, Arensky mentioned to Tchaikovsky that I had written some piano pieces in ternary song from his class and asked whether he could care to hear them. Tchaikovsky nodded his assent, and I sat down to play my pieces, for I knew them by heart. When I had finished them, I saw Tchaikovsky go over to the examination record and write something on it. It was only 2 weeks later that Arensky told me what was written there. He was probably afraid that I could become vain, so he kept it a secret from me. The board had granted me a 5+, the highest rating, and Tchaikovsky had added 3+ signs to this mark, over it, below it, and beside it. It was decided that in the early autumn I should enter Taneev's first-year counterpoint class, and thus my fate as a composer was, as it were, officially sealed. The only work by Rachmaninoff during this term is a group of fragments for an opera Esmeralda, dated October 17, 1888. From the summer of 1889, Rachmaninoff brought back to Moscow a tremendous appetite for composing. It was inevitable that this would lead to conflict with Zverev, for the teacher had often made it clear that a good piano talent should not waste itself in composition, and Zverev considered Rachmaninoff the best of the young piano talents. He finally summoned enough courage to ask Zverev for another piano and a room or some place in the house where there could be some degree of privacy for his work. According to Rachmaninoff, this request might easily have been granted by Zverev if it had been fully explained to him, and Rachmaninoff felt chiefly responsible for what occurred because his approach to Zverev had been wrong or abrupt, and because he had not indicated the gratitude he felt for all that Zverev had already done for him. But his mingled pride, confusion, and excitement during the interview somehow transformed a calm conversation into a stormy argument, and Zverev, losing control of himself, suddenly raised his hand against the pupil. Rachmaninoff was already a young man of 16, and he would not tolerate such a gesture. He firmly declared to Zverev, "You do not dare hit me," whereupon Zverev's fury grew unimaginable, and the interview ended in a total break of relations. Rachmaninoff continued to live in Zverev's house for another month, but the teacher did nothing to assist a reconciliation. He soon after packed all his things and moved in with a fellow student at the Conservatory, Mikhail Slonov, hoping that he could support himself with the monthly 15 rubles he had been making with piano lessons. Hearing about this crisis with Zverev, his mother had invited him to come back to St. Petersburg and transfer to the Conservatory there, where Anton Rubinstein had resumed his piano classes and Rimsky-Korsakov taught composition. Rachmaninoff, however, refused.